Good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And when Cyril Ramaphosa said in Parliament a couple of months ago, our resources are officially depleted, he basically meant that the state of South Africa is bankrupt, on the bones of its ass. And things are getting worse and worse and worse. And I'll give you an update of what's happened since that Ramaphosa statement. The smart money is already leaving the country ahead of two looming dates on the economic calendar, a news agency reported this week. The dates are the 30th of October, when Finance Minister Tito Mboweni tables a medium-term budget, and 2 days later, on the 1st of November 2019, when Moody announces whether the country's debt is still investment grade, which most people are suggesting they'll downgrade to junk. The gravity of the situation has been communicated to the powers that be. In a presentation marked secret to the National Executive Committee, or NEC, of the ANC last weekend, Mboweni showed the alarming decline in tax revenues against budgeted estimates that have increased in the past 3 years by a negative 30%, a negative 49%, and most lately, a negative 57%. Mboweni said this decreases despite additional taxation measures being put in place, including the 1 percentage point increase in VAT, or value-added tax. His presentation showed that government spending has been rising, even without taking the money spent on propping up state-owned enterprises into account. This is because of generous wage agreements for civil servants and widening social grants coverage. Get that? Widening social grants coverage, SASSA. We talked about that yesterday. The finance minister said interest rate costs have been the fastest growing expenditure item for the past 10 years, displacing real spending. So it's like having a credit card. The South African government have got this huge credit card, and now what they're trying to do is just repay the interest on their debt. That's how bad it's become. Mboweni told the NEC, warning, we need urgent progress on reforming institutions that are a drag on our current performance. That action now can avoid even greater pain later, and that if no corrections occur, even in a slow environment, we face greater adjustments in 3 years' time. Bloomberg reported this week that with still a month to go until Moody's reviews South African ratings, foreign investors are not taking any chances. Overseas ownership of South African government debt fell to 37% of the total at the end of August, from a high of 43% in March 2018. According to National Treasury data, that's the lowest level since February 2017, suggesting some investors aren't waiting for Moody's to downgrade the country to junk, a move which would see it removed from the Citicorp's World Government Bond Index, or WGBI, sparking forced sales by investors who tracked the gauge, Bloomberg said. Mboweni's presentation to the NEC drew heavily on a document he released some weeks ago, which immediately drew flack, from organised labour in particular, as it was made available for public comment rather than first being sent to the ANC's tripartite alliance structures. But in a post-NEC briefing by Secretary-General Ace Magashule, it appears that Mboweni's mooted reforms in the area of infrastructure, competitiveness, ease of doing business, agro-processing, tourism, subsidising inefficient state-owned companies, promoting labour-intensive growth and supporting small business, have largely been accepted, but the extent to which the responsible ministers will implement these reforms remains to be seen. The exception to the general acceptance of his proposal was Mboweni's call to reduce the extension of collective bargaining agreements which favour big business and big labour to the detriment of the unemployed and small business. This mooted reform will be sent to the National Economic Development and Labour Council for further deliberation. But the elephant in this room that will need addressing, if any of the mooted reforms are to work, is fixing the broken Eskom. And with a Boris Johnson-type guillotine less than a month away, there are numerous competing options for the way forward. These include auctioning Eskom's power stations, accessing a green financing mechanism linked to the agreed timetable to phase out coal, a transfer of Eskom's debt to the government balance sheet, a strategic equity partner, and swapping Eskom's debt for equity. Now, while we're talking about Eskom, they've just changed the rules when it comes to the amount of money you're going to pay for electricity. And whether you have solar power subsidizing your electricity account in the past in places like Johannesburg, you're going to have to pay the full bill. So they're going to just write off what you've actually contributed towards your electricity bill. This is quite incredible. It's a new development by Eskom. Mbowene's reform documents argued for Eskom's power stations to be put on the auction block to wipe out the utility's 450 billion rand debt, a proposal that appears to have limited traction in policy-making circles, with one participant saying such a sale would be unlikely to raise that much money. No, you'll probably have a loss at the end of the day. South Africa, together with other coal-intensive countries, was not granted speaking rights at the United Nations Climate Summit last week because of the disproportionate contribution to the climate emergency. But President Cyril Ramaphosa said in a statement that a proposed $11 billion just transaction was being developed, which would be the largest climate financial deal to date and which would have a significant effect on emissions. Now, where is a bankrupt country going to get $11 billion to do this? This is all pie in the sky. The plan, which is yet to be released for public scrutiny, was formulated by Meridian Economics and envisions Eskom being loaned money by global development finance institutions at concessionary rates on condition it accelerates the closure of polluting coal plants in favour of renewable energy. But the ANC's economic transformation head, Enoch Gondongwana, speaking on Tuesday at an asset management industry function, said he did not support the creation of a special purpose vehicle to take on Eskom debt. Neither did he back the green transaction in the form currently being proposed. Engineering Report News reported him as saying, Eskom has debt of 450 billion rand and it can service only 200 billion rand, so they need to offload 250 billion rand. My view is that we should put that into the sovereign instead of complicating the structure. Sovereign being South Africa's debt. The markets, Godongwana argued, would understand such a transfer and would also accept the associated spike in the government's fiscal ratios, such as debt to gross domestic product and the budget deficit. Godongwana said 5 international investors over the past 2 weeks had indicated a preference for a simple arrangement that did not further complicate the structure. A statement released by the ANC after the NEC meeting said priority areas discussed included the restructuring of Eskom and tackling its unsustainable financial position, as well as those of South African Airways, Denel, and other state-owned enterprises. The long-standing ANC policy with respect to strategic equity partners in various state-owned companies was agreed, and consideration will be given to models of worker and social relationships. So there appears still to be multiple options on the table, including an auction, a blended green finance facility, a transfer to debt from utility to sovereign, and on an equity partner which might include worker or social ownership. Godongwana told the media briefing that funding for Eskom would be complete when Mboweni makes his medium-term budget statement on October the 30th. Mboweni added little, saying, I'll have things to say in my government capacity, not here. Matthew Parks, a parliamentary officer for Trade Union Federation, COSATU, said the plan to save Eskom is a ticking time bomb scheduled to go off at the end of October. He said, after 18 months of dithering, the situation is extremely worrying. A serious narrative on the way forward is needed. Parks said a range of bilateral talks between ministers and organised labour are scheduled. A high-level task force, which will meet at NEDLAC from mid-month, has also been constituted. One option is for the Public Investment Corporation to swap 104 billion rand in Eskom bonds that it still holds for equity. But, says Park, there would have to be a proper audit of all Eskom's finances, including its coal contracts, for this to happen, as pension funds need to see that their investment can generate a profit before they put money in it. Another initiative between the Ministers of Public Enterprise and Energy, Pravin Gordhan and Gweri Mantashe, respectively, with independent power producers, has suggested a haircut, that is, lower tariffs, perhaps in exchange for extending the life of these contracts. Bloomberg said the sell-off of South African bonds was despite the fact that South Africa's yield are the highest in the WGBI, which requires an investment-grade rating from either Moody's or S&P Global Ratings and is tracked by investors overseeing as much as $3 trillion. He said investors who would be forced sellers in a downgrade, some of them have sold. Edwin Gutteritz, head of emerging markets, sovereign debt at Aberdeen Assets Management, told Bloomberg that Ramaphosa has clearly died. A credit downgrade will mean a higher cost of borrowing and a further straitened economy and fiscus, resulting in less growth and opportunity, fewer jobs and more potential discord. So it is alarming that our policymakers dither while a Boris-type clock ticks down. So, if Moody's lower the grading on the rand to junk, it ain't going to be good. It's that simple. All right, guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video. Please share this video. And above all, stay safe.